A homeless boy stood alone under the flickering street lamp, shivering inside a jacket that wasn't his. People passed him without a glance, stepping around him like he was part of the pavement. But the biker's mom didn't. She stopped, looked at him, saw something the street had buried in silence, and when the biker arrived minutes later, the boy's breath hitched, as if he finally recognized someone who might not walk away. The biker noticed the scrap of paper crushed in the boy's hand. Not trash. Not a plea. A name written in shaky letters. A name the biker knew too well. Something tightened behind his jaw. The kind of weight that didn't come from anger, but from history clawing its way back into the present. The street kept moving. Engines idled. People ignored the moment unfolding beside them. But for the biker, this wasn't noise. This was a call. A quiet one. The kind only a certain kind of man could hear. And before the night was over, 200 bikers would roll down that narrow street. Not for violence, not for glory, but because of a code older than the city around them. A code that said, you don't turn your back on the forgotten. Not when they stand in front of your own blood. Follow this account so you don't miss the Guardian's stories. Under the weak glow of the streetlights, the boy kept his eyes lowered, as if any direct look might break whatever thin strength he had left. The biker's mom crouched beside him, her hands steady despite the cold biting through her sleeves. She asked nothing at first. She just waited, the way someone waits for a truth that hurts to say out loud. When the boy finally murmured his name, it came out small, like he wasn't sure he deserved to be heard. The biker stood a few steps back, arms crossed, letting the silence settle. He watched the way the kid held that scrap of paper. Not loose, not casual, tight, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The biker didn't interrupt. He read people better when they thought no one was looking. The boy's clothes were layered but thin, sleeves torn near the wrist, dirt under the nails, but clean cheeks. Someone who tried to stay human even when the world pushed him toward the edge. His mom asked where he'd come from. The boy's shoulders twitched at the question. Not fear of her, fear of the answer. He looked at the ground, then at the biker for half a second. The biker didn't nod, didn't soften, didn't offer comfort. He simply held the boy's gaze until the boy realized he wasn't being judged, just seen. Really seen. The boy whispered something about a shelter that wouldn't take him anymore. A man who'd followed him out 2 nights ago. A warning he didn't understand until it was too late. The biker's mom's jaw tightened, the way it did when she recognized a world that failed someone who tried to survive it. She asked about the paper. The boy hesitated, then opened his hand. It was damp and worn, folded and unfolded too many times. A name. The biker's mom read it. Her breath caught. She passed it to her son. When he saw the handwriting, the uneven lines, the shaky letter shapes, something in him paused. He knew that name, his mother's maiden name. Their branch of family burned off long ago, no contact left, and under the name a smaller word, help, written by someone who didn't know how to ask for it properly. The biker didn't move, didn't speak, but the air around him shifted, as if the temperature dropped a few degrees. The boy's eyes flicked up again, his voice trembling, while he explained that a woman had given him the note weeks ago, telling him to find that name if things ever got worse. He said she never came back. He didn't know what happened to her, only that a man kept showing up, asking about her, asking about him, asking in a way that made the boy run every time. The biker's mom placed her hand lightly on the boy's shoulder. He flinched, then settled. She told him he was safe now. But the biker knew safety wasn't a promise you made. It was something you fought for, silently, without witnesses. He studied the street, the corners, the shadows. Someone had been tracking this kid. Hard. Long enough to wear him down. He checked the paper again, the name staring back. His blood. His responsibility. Even if the world had tried to bury the connection, the code didn't bend. The boy's stomach growled. The mom stood, telling him they'd get him warm food. The biker didn't argue, just followed as they headed toward the small diner at the end of the block. A place where the light was always too bright and the coffee too bitter, but where people still pretended the world outside wasn't cracking. Inside, heads turned for a moment at the sight of the biker, then went back to their late plates and tired conversations. The boy slid into a booth, hands shaking as he wrapped them around the cup of water the mom set in front of him. He kept looking toward the door, expecting someone, fearing someone. The biker caught every glance. When the food arrived, the boy ate fast at first, then slowed like he wasn't sure if it was allowed. The biker watched the way his shoulders curled inward, the way he kept the paper close on the table. That was the object that tied everything together, the silent revelation. A message from someone who trusted the wrong world but the right name. Outside, a car rolled past the diner slowly, too slowly. The biker didn't look away from the window. This wasn't random anymore. This was a trail, and now it led straight to him. The car's engine faded into the distance, but the boy's grip on the fork didn't loosen. His eyes stayed locked on the window, waiting for shapes he recognized, dreading the ones he didn't. The biker sat across from him, unmoving, the weight of the moment stretching thin between them. The mom tried to keep the boy focused on eating, but the tension in the diner shifted, settling around their booth like a cold draft. The biker finally spoke, his voice low, steady, stripped of anything soft. He asked the boy to tell him exactly who had been looking for him. The boy swallowed hard, eyes darting. He said the man wasn't from the shelter. He wasn't from any service. He didn't work there, he just showed up. First pretending to help, then showing too much interest in the woman who'd protected the boy, asking questions that didn't fit, following them when they left. The woman had told the boy to run if she ever didn't come back. And then one morning she didn't. The mom asked if anyone reported her missing. The boy shook his head. No one cared, he said quietly. The shelter staff changed often. People moved on. She didn't have family. Nobody even knew her real last name, just her first name, written on the corner of a bed sheet she used as a blanket. The biker asked for the name. The boy gave it. The biker had heard it before, years ago. A different city. A woman who'd drifted through his mother's outreach group once, long before she disappeared into the cracks again. She'd carried wounds she never explained and a stubbornness the world punished. And now that same world had swallowed her whole, leaving this boy behind with only the name of the one person she hoped might understand the danger. The mom reached for the boy's hand, but he pulled away gently. He said he didn't want trouble. He just needed to know if the woman was still alive. He didn't care what happened to him after that. The biker studied him, not the words but the way he said them. That wasn't despair. That was surrender learned too early. Another car rolled by, not the same one. But the biker's instincts shifted again. He scanned reflections on the chrome napkin holder, the angle of the parked vehicles, the way a shadow lingered a moment too long before moving on. Someone was surveying the area, not rushing, patient, confident enough to circle. That meant they weren't just following the boy. They were hunting him. The mom noticed the biker's posture change. Her expression darkened. She asked the boy if the man ever said what he wanted. The boy nodded slowly. He said the man wanted something the woman had taken from him, something she hid. He didn't know what it was. He only knew she told him never to show the note to anyone except the name written on it. The biker's jaw flexed. That made the boy flinch, thinking he'd said something wrong. The biker shook his head once, not at him, at the world that had put him here. He told the boy to hand him the note again. The boy hesitated, then slid it across the table. The biker looked closer this time. The writing wasn't just shaky, it was uneven in a way he recognized, someone writing while injured or while hiding. And on the corner of the paper, barely visible unless you tilted it toward the light, was a faint smear. Not dirt, old dried blood, a mark left by someone who didn't have time to think about leaving messages clean or safe. The mum covered her mouth as she realized it. The boy froze. The biker folded the note carefully and placed it inside his vest, not for safekeeping, for responsibility. He stood. The boy lurched back in the seat, thinking he was being left. But the biker looked at him in a way that made the kid sit still. The biker told him no one was leaving him behind. Not tonight. Not ever again. The mom slid out of the booth and went to settle the bill. The biker walked to the door, scanning the street again. A truck idled half a block down. Lights off. Occupied. He didn't stare long. Didn't need to. He'd already marked it. When they stepped outside, the wind hit hard, carrying the smell of rain and cold asphalt. The boy stuck close to the mom as they approached the biker's motorcycle. He told her he could walk, that he didn't want to cause trouble. The mom told him he already had, just by surviving long enough to reach them. The biker didn't speak. He started the engine, the sound rolling across the street like a warning. The truck down the block shut off its engine in response. Not a coincidence, not a mistake. The biker motioned for the boy to ride with the mom in her car behind him. He stayed in front, forming a barrier the boy didn't fully understand, but felt deeply. As they pulled away, the truck stayed still. For now, watching, tracking, waiting. The biker led them through side streets, avoiding open intersections. He rode with the precision of someone who'd learned to move in dangerous places long before tonight. Every turn was intentional, every glance measured. By the time they reached the mom's small house, the boy was asleep in the passenger seat of her car, exhaustion finally overtaking fear. The biker parked his motorcycle near the curb, scanning the street again. No headlights followed, but the air still felt wrong. Inside, the mom laid a blanket on the couch and gently settled the boy down. He didn't wake, just curled around the edge of the fabric like he wasn't used to softness. The biker watched from the doorway, arms crossed, silent. The mom whispered that they needed to call someone. Anyone. The biker shook his head. Not yet. Not until he knew exactly what they were dealing with. Authorities didn't help people like this kid until it was too late. The world had shown that too many times. He stepped outside again. The street was quiet, but quiet didn't mean safe. He stood there, staring down the dark stretch of road, letting the cold bite into him. The note inside his vest felt heavier than paper. A message from someone who'd vanished, entrusted to a child she couldn't protect. And now the trail circled back to him. This wasn't over, not even close. The biker stayed on the porch until the cold settled into his knuckles. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched the road the way a man watches a memory trying to take shape. The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet for a street that usually carried the sound of late-night arguments and tired engines. Silence like that didn't happen on its own. It meant someone was already controlling the space. Inside, the mom checked on the boy again. He hadn't moved. His breathing was shallow, the kind that came from someone who never slept deeply, never felt safe enough to let himself fall fully into rest. She adjusted the blanket, then looked toward the door where her son stood like a guard carved out of the night. She stepped out, pulling her sweater tight around her arms. She asked him what he was thinking. He didn't answer. She knew that silence. It wasn't avoidance. It was calculation. He'd slipped into a mindset she'd seen only a handful of times, when someone weak was being cornered and the world expected him to look away. She reminded him that the boy needed rest, not fear. He nodded once, but his eyes never left the road. She asked if he recognized the name on the paper any more clearly now. He said yes. The name traced back to a woman who'd run from someone dangerous, someone with reach, someone who targeted people without support systems and used them until they broke. The mom asked if he thought that same man was after the boy now. The biker didn't say yes, he didn't need to. His silence answered for him. A damp breeze swept through the street, carrying the faint smell of exhaust from far away. He caught it, not because it was strong, but because it was wrong for that hour. He told his mom to go inside and lock the door. She hesitated, searching his face for something human, something reassuring. But he wasn't offering reassurance tonight, only certainty. She went in, leaving him alone with the stillness. 10 minutes passed, maybe more. Time lost its edges when he was working through danger. A lone streetlight flickered at the end of the block. He watched it, like a signal. When a shadow moved near it, too slow, too measured to be casual, he shifted his stance, grounding his weight. A figure was standing there, not approaching, observing, testing distance. The biker didn't move toward him, didn't call out. He just existed in the space with a presence that told anyone watching he wasn't the one who should worry. The figure took a step back into deeper shadow, then disappeared around the corner. The biker breathed out once, so they were watching the house. They weren't rushing. That meant they were confident, overconfident. That kind of arrogance usually came from men who thought no one would challenge them. Inside, the heating clicked on. The boy stirred. The mum hummed softly, trying not to wake him. The house felt small compared to the danger pressing in from outside. The biker came in only long enough to grab the phone off the counter. The mum asked who he was calling. He didn't respond. He stepped back out into the night before she could ask again. He dialed a number he hadn't used in months, maybe longer. It rang once, twice. Then a gravel-heavy voice answered, not with a greeting but with a question. Where? The biker gave the street name, nothing more. The line went dead immediately afterward. The mom opened the door a crack, whispering his name. She asked if he was bringing trouble here. He told her trouble was already here. He was bringing balance. She didn't like that answer, but she understood it. He returned to the living room. The boy's eyes were open now, unfocused at first, then scared when he noticed how dark it was. He murmured that he shouldn't stay, that the man looking for him didn't stop once he started. The biker sat on the edge of the coffee table, close enough for the boy to feel protected but not trapped. He told the boy that running only worked until the hunter got bored. This one wasn't bored. So no, he wasn't letting the kid go anywhere. The boy's breathing sped up. He said the woman had tried the same thing, standing between him and the man. She told the boy to run, to survive, to find the name on the paper if things went wrong. He said she promised she'd catch up. She never did. The mom closed her eyes at those words, the kind of quiet grief only adults deeply understood. The biker didn't react outwardly, but something shifted in his posture, like another piece of the truth had slid into place. He asked the boy the last moment he saw the woman. The boy described a parking lot behind the shelter, a confrontation. The man telling her she had something that belonged to him, she telling him she'd burn it before she gave it back. The boy didn't hear what it was. The woman pushed him behind a dumpster, told him not to move no matter what. Then she walked toward the man, shoulders squared even though she was shaking. The boy said she looked back once, like she was trying to memorize him. And then the man grabbed her arm, hard. She didn't scream, and the boy never saw her again. The biker's hands tightened slowly, the only sign of emotion he allowed. The mom whispered a prayer under her breath. The boy looked down at his hands like he expected blame. Instead, the biker told him he did exactly what she asked. That wasn't failure. That was survival. Outside, in the distance, a rumble began. Low, growing. The biker stood. His mom recognized that sound instantly. The boy lifted his head, confused. The biker stepped onto the porch. Headlights began appearing at the far end of the street. 1, then 3, then more. Engines growled in a slow, deliberate rhythm, not rushing, not chaotic, controlled. A formation only one kind of brotherhood moved in. Bikes filled the road, rolling in like a tide of steel and resolve. The Guardian's call had been answered, and the night stopped breathing. The first bike stopped directly in front of the house, its engine settling into a deep idle that vibrated through the pavement. Then another pulled alongside it. Then another. Within seconds, the entire street, normally forgotten by the city, was lined with steel and leather, and men who didn't need introductions. They didn't remove their helmets. They didn't speak. They just waited, their presence turning the neighborhood into a place where danger had to reconsider its confidence. The boy stood behind the screen door, blanket hanging off his shoulders, eyes wide as he watched the quiet arrival of men he'd only heard rumors about. Men the city called dangerous, men the city feared. But to the biker, they weren't danger. They were certainty. A wall the world didn't push through. The mum stepped onto the porch, arms crossed tight, though her face held none of the fear she'd had earlier. She wasn't scared of them. She knew most of these men by name, or at least by the way they carried themselves. Men her son once rode with before life pulled him down a quieter path. Men who showed up only when silence wasn't enough to hold a line. One of them, a tall man with broad shoulders and a scar that cut across his jaw, approached the biker. He didn't say hello, he simply asked, "How many?" The biker answered with a single word. 1. Watching the street, more behind him. The man nodded once, then turned to the others. No speeches, no discussions. They spread out instantly, down the sidewalks toward corners and alleys, filling the space with quiet discipline. The residents of the block peeked through curtains, unsure whether to be scared or grateful. But the boy, he watched as if something inside him was loosening, like he'd never seen adults move for his safety before. The biker returned inside and closed the door softly behind him. The boy backed up a step, overwhelmed by the presence outside. The mom guided him back to the couch, brushing the hair from his forehead gently. He asked if they were here because of him. The biker said no. They were here because someone thought no one would step in. That was the mistake. The boy looked down, tugging the blanket tighter. He asked if the woman who protected him would have been scared of these men. The biker shook his head. She would have understood them. She came from the same kind of silence. The boy didn't fully understand, but he nodded anyway, clinging to the first sense of stability he'd felt in months. A knock hit the door, not urgent, just firm. Controlled. The biker opened it to find one of the riders pointing toward the end of the block. A car had rolled in, headlights off, slowing as it reached the line of bikes. It stopped, then reversed into a driveway across the street, waiting. The biker stepped outside. The night air was colder now, but he welcomed the sharpness. It made things clear. He approached the car slowly, boots steady on the asphalt. The driver tried to back out again, but two more bikes pulled in behind him, blocking the exit without touching the vehicle. The driver couldn't see their faces, only the silhouettes and the leather patches that didn't need interpretation. The biker stopped at the front of the car and stared at the windshield. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Just waited. Eventually the driver cracked the window. A man's voice snapped from inside, brittle with anger masking fear. He demanded to know why the road was blocked, why these men were here, why he couldn't leave. The biker asked where he was going. The man didn't answer. Instead, he tried to stare him down, but the attempt died quickly. The biker kept pressing, not loudly, not threateningly, just fact by fact, stripping away excuses. Who was he looking for? Why had he circled the block twice? Why had he been seen near the shelter? The man's responses faltered, shifting from anger to confusion to the kind of panic that made lies collapse. The biker leaned down, eyes level with the crack in the window, and asked one last question. Where is the woman who gave the boy that note? The man froze. Completely. His breath caught. The reaction told the biker more than any answer could. The biker straightened, signaled with a small tilt of his head. The bikes behind the car revved once. Not a threat, a confirmation. The man swallowed and finally muttered something, too quiet to hear, but loud enough to reveal guilt. He wasn't alone in this. He was a messenger, a watcher, and watchers always reported back. The biker didn't break the window, didn't pull the man out, didn't need to. Instead, he turned and walked back toward the house. The bikes surrounding the car parted just enough to give the driver a path. He hesitated only a moment before slamming the car into reverse, peeling out in a panic. The riders didn't follow. They didn't have to. They'd already marked the car, the plates, the direction it fled. When the biker returned to the porch, his mom asked what the man had said. He told her it didn't matter. What mattered was that more were coming. The boy's shoulders tensed at the word more. The mom looked toward the window where the street glowed under the scattered bike headlights. She asked if this was about the object the woman had taken. He nodded once. The boy whispered that he didn't know what it was. He didn't know where she hid it. The biker told him that didn't matter either. Whoever was looking for it assumed the boy knew something, and men like that didn't stop until they got what they wanted, or were forced to. The rumble outside intensified as more bikes arrived, filling the street until it felt like the world had shifted its weight onto this single block. The boy stepped to the window and watched in awe as riders formed a perimeter, their presence heavy enough to bend the night. He asked if they were here to fight. The biker said no. They were here to end something. The boy didn't understand the difference yet, but he would. Down the street, another engine sounded, different from the others. A heavier car, slower, more deliberate. The biker's eyes tracked the sound long before the headlights appeared. This wasn't a scout. This wasn't a watcher. This was the man himself. And the real confrontation was about to begin. The approaching car didn't rush. It crawled down the street, heavy tires pressing slow patterns into the cold pavement. Every biker along the block shifted, not aggressively, just adjusting their stance, forming a barrier that didn't need words. The boy stepped back from the window, clutching the blanket like he expected the glass to shatter. The mom stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder, the other gripping her own wrist to steady herself. The biker walked onto the porch, letting the door ease shut behind him. He didn't square his shoulders or crack his knuckles. He didn't have to. His presence alone shifted the weight of the night. The car rolled to a stop in the center of the street, surrounded on both sides by chrome and steel. The driver didn't cut the engine. The idle was low, confident, the kind of sound made by someone who believed he controlled the situation. He didn't. A door opened. A man stepped out, mid-40s, expensive coat, confident walk. But when he saw 200 silent riders watching him, something in his stride faltered, only for a second, but enough for the biker to catch. Men like him were bold until confronted by forces they couldn't quantify. He lifted his hands not in surrender but in irritation. He said he was looking for a runaway, a kid who'd stolen something. He claimed he was here to bring the boy back to the place he belonged. He scanned the house, eyes sharp and invasive, lingering too long on the lit window. The biker descended the steps one slow step at a time. He didn't stop until he stood between the man and the house. The man's confidence wavered again, irritation turning into something closer to caution. He asked what all these riders were doing here. The biker didn't answer. Silence was a blade, and he let it cut through the man's composure. When the man demanded the boy be handed over, the nearest row of riders straightened, their boots scraping the pavement. Not a threat, a reminder. The biker finally spoke, his voice calm, almost quiet. He asked the man why the woman who protected the boy had disappeared, why she'd left a note written in blood, why the man had followed a child across 3 shelters and 2 districts. The man gave excuses, claimed she was unstable, claimed the boy knew more than he let on, claimed he was simply retrieving what was his. The biker asked what that was. The man hesitated. The biker watched the microseconds between question and lie. Hesitation always revealed guilt. The man said it was paperwork, records, something the woman shouldn't have taken, but his eyes gave him away. Records didn't make men hunt children. The biker stepped closer. The man stepped back. Around them the riders closed ranks, the quiet hum of engines deepening into a sound that felt like a warning rolling through the ground. The man glanced at his car, calculating escape. The riders already blocked every angle. The biker told him the boy wasn't leaving with him. Not now. Not ever. The man's mask cracked. Anger surged, desperate and ugly. He said he had rights, said he had people waiting, said he had authority. Authority didn't carry weight here. The biker told him he'd made one mistake too many, thinking no one would stand in front of a child with no last name and no chance. The man tried to reach inside his coat. Not for a weapon, the biker saw that instantly, but for a phone. He meant to call reinforcements, leverage, pressure. He never made the call. One of the riders, older, slow-moving but heavy with certainty, stepped behind him and took the phone cleanly from his hand. The man spun, furious, sputtering threats about consequences and laws. The riders said nothing. They didn't need to. The biker leaned in just enough for the man to hear him over the engines. He told him the woman who protected the boy had died trying to keep something out of his hands, something the man would never reclaim, something he'd buried her for. The man froze, just like the watcher earlier. A single crack in the facade, exposing everything. The biker asked him where her body was. The man didn't answer. The biker asked again, quieter this time. Still nothing, but the silence was an answer of its own, and every rider on that street understood it. The biker stepped back, slowly, deliberately. He wasn't touching the man. He wasn't threatening him. He was letting the weight of 200 watchers settle on him until the truth pressed out of the cracks. The man finally broke, mumbling a location on the outskirts, an abandoned storage lot, the place where people went when they didn't want witnesses. The biker nodded once to the riders nearest him. 3 peeled off instantly and rode into the night, engines roaring toward the coordinates the man had given. The man tried to backpedal, claiming he hadn't meant harm, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, claiming the boy belonged to the system. The biker let him talk until the lies ran dry. Then he told the man the street had heard enough. He signaled with 2 fingers. The riders didn't touch the man, they didn't strike him or drag him. They simply formed a path, a narrow, silent corridor of steel and leather, a walk of truth, a walk where every step echoed the reality that he'd been weighed and exposed. The biker told him to leave, to walk to his car, to drive away, and never come near the boy again. Not the street, not the houses, not the shelters, not anywhere the vulnerable lived. The man tried to argue, but his own voice shook. He walked the corridor. Every rider watched him, not with rage, not with violence, with judgment. He got into his car with trembling hands. When the engine turned over, the riders parted just enough for him to flee. He sped away, disappearing into the dark, chased not by bikes, but by the silence he couldn't outrun. The biker remained in the center of the street long after the car was gone. One rider approached and asked, "You done?" The biker looked toward the house, where the boy watched from behind the curtain. "Not yet," he said. The real justice still waited in the night. The street stayed lined with bikes until the first hint of pale light touched the rooftops. The engines were quiet now, cooling in the cold air, while their riders waited without impatience. No one spoke. No one asked questions. The stillness was its own language, one the biker had lived in long before this night. One of the riders returned first, his headlights sweeping across the rows of chrome before stopping near the biker. He dismounted, shoulders heavy with something that didn't need words. He handed the biker a small item wrapped in cloth. The biker took it, unwrapping it slowly. Inside was a thin silver chain with a dull, scratched pendant, the kind someone wore every day until life stripped meaning out of it. On the back, barely visible, was a single initial, the same initial written on the corner of the note the woman had left for the boy. The biker closed his hand around it. Not tight, just enough to acknowledge what it meant. Behind him, the boy stood in the doorway, blanket draped around him, eyes fixed on the object. He didn't ask if they'd found her. His body already understood the truth. Loss worked that way. It moved ahead of words. The biker walked to him, stopping just close enough for the boy to see the pendant resting in his palm. The boy stared at it like he was trying to breathe through a hole too small. He reached out, but didn't touch. His voice broke as he asked if she was gone. The biker gave a single nod. No softness, no kindness, just truth steady enough not to crush him. The boy sagged forward, catching the edge of the doorframe. He didn't cry. Kids like him rarely did. Tears required safety, and he was still learning what that felt like. The mom pulled him into her arms, not to shield him, but to give him a place to stand while the world shifted under his feet. She told him the woman hadn't died alone. Not now. Not anymore. Her story had reached the right people. The biker placed the pendant into the boy's hand. The boy closed his fingers around it, holding it against his chest like a heartbeat he didn't want to forget. He whispered that the woman had always promised someone would come. He never believed her, not until tonight. The biker stepped back onto the porch, scanning the street one last time. The riders waited for his signal. He didn't speak. He just nodded once. Engines rumbled to life in perfect unison, shaking the pavement but not the boy. He stood there watching as 200 bikes rolled away, not in triumph, not in anger, but in closure. When the last engine faded, the street felt strangely open, as if the night had carried away something heavy. The boy looked up at the biker and asked what he should do now. The biker told him to rest, to eat, to breathe. The world had taken too much from him already. It didn't get to take the morning, too. The mom guided the boy inside, setting warm tea on the table, her movements steady despite everything she'd witnessed. The biker lingered outside a moment longer, staring at the horizon where the first thin line of sunrise cut through the clouds. Justice wasn't loud tonight. It didn't roar. It didn't burn. It settled, quiet and heavy, into the places where silence had once lived. The biker felt the weight shift off the street, off his mother's doorway, off the boy whose life had been hanging by a thread thinner than the pendant chain he now held. He didn't smile. He didn't soften. but something in him acknowledged the balance restored. Inside, the boy sat at the table, pendant resting in his hands, grief and relief mixing in a way that made his shoulders tremble. He looked up at the biker, searching his face for something he couldn't name. The biker gave him the only thing he could offer, the certainty that no one would ever hunt him again. The boy nodded slowly, not in understanding, in acceptance. The mom placed a hand on the biker's arm as she passed, a small gesture, a quiet, "Thank you." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. He took one last look at the boy, safer now than he had been in months, and stepped back onto the porch. The house behind him held warmth. The street ahead held cold. But he walked toward the cold without hesitation. Some roads didn't end. They just waited. What would have happened if he hadn't heard the call tonight? Someone else can answer that. He never will. What mattered was this. A boy who had nothing left now had a name to hold, a truth to keep, and a street that stood still when he needed it most. What mattered was that the code remained intact. What mattered was that justice, quiet and unspoken, had been done. What would you have done in his place? Share your thoughts and spread this story.